Hello, everyone, and once again, welcome to another CANNAtalk session. I'd like to thank CANNA for organizing these events and being leaders in educating and supporting and developing our industry. Today, we are going to talk about what's in a gram, a focus on production costs. But before we get into it, a couple of little housekeeping items. This is an interactive session, pardon me, and we encourage listeners to submit questions that will take along the session. So you can see a QA code, a QR code, pardon, QR code in the top right corner where you can use your mobile device and scan it, ask your question there, or you can scroll down into full screen mode and ask your question there. Obviously, everybody else besides the panelists and myself will be muted. So please use the questions to ask your questions. So today we brought industry leaders to discuss the intricate world of production cost analysis. We've talked about this in the past, but we really want to dive into some fine details on how to be more competitive. So taxes, we all know they play a crucial role, but they're just one piece of the puzzle, and we're not going to better the taxes in this kind of conversation. So we'd like to look at other things to see where we can be more competitive and where we can reduce costs and really understanding our costs. Unfortunately, we had three panelists lined up for today, but Corey Russell was not able to join us today. So please welcome our two great panelists. First, we have George Goulakos. He's the Executive VP of Sales and Marketing at Great White North Growers. They are home to seasoned, passionate growers who bring their extensive experience to deliver unparalleled cultivation, merging skill with expertise. They offer a comprehensive 360-degree solution that covers every step of the cannabis journey from A to Z. Then we have Nick Sosiak. He is the CFO at Cannara Biotech. Delivering a premium quality product at an accessible price is at the heart of their ethos. This principle has guided them since the onset and has allowed their company to emerge as one of Quebec's fastest growing licensed producers. For more details on our panelists, please click on their bio for full information and ways to connect with them. All right. So, Nick, I'd like to start with you. So, first and foremost, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
That's my pleasure.
Let's get into some of these financial aspects. So, in order to be competitive and sometimes disruptive, as you have on your website, it does say that you like to be disruptive in the industry. Can you explain the level of details that's needed to monitor and control production costs to be able to achieve this?
Absolutely. There's no golden plan. There's no textbook on how to grow cannabis, how to grow it at cheap, effective prices, and how to make sure that quality cost ratio is perfect. So it's been an R&D project since the beginning. We continue to invest heavily in that process. So it's never finished till we get it right. But there's a lot involved, right? The first part, it all starts with the grow. You need to, depending on which market or which kind of product you're looking for, if you're looking for high quality or lower quality cannabis, that's definitely going to make the decisions, it factor into the decisions you're doing for your grow and your cultivation and your cost. But for us, we try to really stretch the barrier of premium while maintaining our costs on our flower. So down to just first of all analysis. We built the process from a quality standpoint. That's how we decided from seed all the way to harvest to trimming to hang drying our plant to hand trimming our plant. So we took an approach of focusing on quality, establishing that benchmark of quality at that price, and then work backwards from there on seeing what kind of improvements we can do on our cost, right? So today we're about 70 cents a gram cost to produce. And that's cost to produce flour in its wet form. And then there's another 40 cents for trimming and drying on top of that. The major factor for for this cost of 70 cents is labor. That makes up about 55% of our total cost, which is about 40 cents a gram. And then the second is utilities. Thankfully, we're about 15% of that 70 cents, so that's about 11 cents a gram. But we're in Quebec, and George can tell us, like, we have access to really low cost of electricity. So that's one feat that I'm sure a lot of producers have a much higher cost per gram on the electricities. And then about 10% material costs and all that, 10% depreciation, and then 10% insurance and taxes. So we got it to that level, and then we focus on quality. And then from this point on, it's really just dialing it in, making sure that the quality benchmark stays there. And then we can dial down, save some in some areas, in terms of different processes, figuring out automation, but making sure that it never affects quality.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much. And I really like that you mentioned the high hitters, the labor and the electricity, but also the other ways that you're looking at breaking down your cost analysis. And I think it's very important to be able to break it down to that level. And I'm sure you're speaking still on the higher level of it, how you record all your costs and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that's how you are able to set those benchmarks and achieve those benchmarks is because you are so detailed in every aspect. Cost of production is not just all lumped in. Uh, Number of kilograms sold per year, and divide that by cost, and then that's your cost of gram. Correct?
Absolutely, Nico. That's when we started. I started back in 2019 when the and when we first had basically a warehouse and an open project plan, right? We were doing construction. We had this vision of growing cannabis. I come from a finance background. My passion is being in the cannabis industry. I knew, and I've seen companies fail in the past if they didn't have a proper ERP system, which tracks everything from seed to sale. So that was when I came on board. I was less in the operations; I was more in the finance, and that was like my main objective. As soon as I came in, I saw they were going towards programs that tracked your seed to grow, but didn't transfer over to inventory, and then that whole transition from that point. And I knew that was going to be a big problem. So we avoided software, the initial softwares like that, and invested into the bigger ERP system, which tracks it really from the input costs to the end. And I helped build that system, right? So tracking, we track we've divided our whole process into 15 or 20 different phases of labor and processing activities, and then we assign labors and time and material to each phase. So that's why we know how much it costs from cultivation, how much it costs for drying, trimming, how much it costs to make it turn into hash, BHO, anything like that. And then that allows us to basically develop our products, benchmark our products, have a benchmark, and then find innovative products. And then I really work backwards, right? I really like we have our costs, contained. Could we do better? Yes, but now at this point, it's innovation, figuring out the next best products, quality products, and then working backwards, trying to make that price, margin, and cost mechanism work in the products that we develop.
Yeah, no, and really, essentially, you guys are taking on process improvement initiatives in a sense, like Lean Six Sigma. It's all about the data and the how fine you can get into your data so that you can go after those half pennies or those pennies that do accumulate to the dollars in the long run, right? We sometimes get blinded by the tax and the labor, which is important. Labor comes into various forms. I mean, it is very expensive. It's needed. However, there's automation that comes in, and you did touch on automation, but you have to be careful of the automation and the quality and where you stand. So, really, really, very informative. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah,
George,
I
kind of.
I would
Sorry,
just add,
go ahead.
I would just add that, what I would just warn for that excise tax break, at least how I price my products, and I'm sure most LPs and people that price their products out there, that excise tax that's built into what it's all static across every licensed producer. It's built into the product price, right? That's how we get to retail prices. So if there's any change in the regime of taxes, I fear that everyone's just going to adjust the calculation of the pricing, and everything's going to go down. And that's why you still have to focus on your costs of production and your cost of cultivation, and your labor costs, and not just rely. For sure, there's going to be definitely a win in that mechanism, not to rely solely on that excise tax mechanism going down.
Very good point, and I'm glad you raised that because there's a lot of hopeful people out there. So let's cross our fingers. George, so similar question about production costs, but you come more on the sales and marketing perspective of things. So how important is it for you to understand the production costs when you want to make market decisions, where you put your product, or if you have to pivot at some point because maybe a province is throwing you a stick in your wheels or something like that. So how important is it for you to understand these production costs
Well, I mean,
at that level?
yeah, and certainly any great salesperson has to understand how the product's manufactured and the cost going in there, so he knows when he's going out exactly where he has play in any negotiation. So it's very important to be to break down silos, to understand what's going on, not just in the production area, in all areas. As we move forward as sales generating money, if we don't know the back room, as I call it, then we're not going to become great salesmen, and we're not going to build relationships with our clients. We're only going to bring disappointment. As you know, we're not as big as Cannara, and we are in an expansion. And when we talk about the cost of production and how we plan for it, of course, it's working with your grower and making sure that you're supplying proper equipment, proper nutrients, and we know we're in good hands with that. And basically, the biggest cost, as Nicholas said, is in manpower, and that too has to be planned. And it's not being planned by suits, as we call it. It should be planned by the people doing the work. The more we understand of their challenges, the more we can supply them with the tools for them to succeed in producing what we all want, is a quality product. I mean, it's got to start there. You can't cut corners and say I'm producing a cheap gram and not delivering a good product. So once we get past the point of we dried it and all that, then there's more to do to bring it to market. And that's where Great White North has been really active in. We aggregate and we package for over 30 LPs. So we take away all that cost, and we also give them a fixed cost as well, so it won't fluctuate. So it's a good way for them to plan, the seed to sell. Once they get the product, then they look at the next level, which is packaging and distributing it, and what are the costs. In our case, since we do aggregate many guys, small and large, then we get some efficiencies on our purchasing of cans. We have great partner in Biz Solution, one of the best in Canada. And we also are very strong in transport with one of the best transport companies, Metro Green. So it's important as you're going through this that you find good partners on the outside of your company, because not everyone can afford to have their own trucks or afford to bring in the cans from China. So with that, we strategically try to pass on those savings to our partners, and they only have to worry about that first part about how they plan their grow. After that's done, after you get your product into a market, you need to sell and market it. So you got to go out there and you got to work with reps. So there's a cost that's associated with every can that you're doing. And that's also something that we, as Great White North, have to think of all the people we distribute it and giving them an option on how to market their product in a certain province, and help them with that through aggregations of influencers and salespeople. We can all share the costs. Obviously, like anything else, the more efficient you are, the more you can bring value to the end consumer, which is what we all want to do, right? We want to bring a great product, take a good margin, and make a customer say, man, that was worth every dollar I spent on it. So there's also that's very important as you're driving your business. And that too will, to communicate that to your consumers costs money, and you need to plan for that. The way Nicholas is broken down, all his cost allows him to be flexible. If he's got a big opportunity out there, he can go back and look at his costs and see where he can maybe save so he can drive that sale. I'm a firm believer that everyone in a company should be driving sales in their own way, whether it's a clean invoice from your accounting department that is very clear that they pay, on time, or the QA. Silos are killing in all industries, and we have to break down those silos and find common goals, which is growing the best cannabis the most efficient way possible. Other things that add to costs that we have to look at is, all the outreach. You have to be at shows, so you have to pick which shows are good for you and your products and your client base. You need to do social media. All that is a must. It's all a must. So it's not a secondary cost. You need to plan expenses to drive your product once you've created it. So like growing, all this needs planning. We need to know the prices that are competitive, and we got to work backwards. But we do know that we need to acknowledge that it's not just about the growing, it's about taking it to market. And all that goes back to the cost of a gram, not just the growing part of it.
Very, very interesting. And that's something that I think a lot of us often don't think about when we're talking about costs. And we're talking about what we see today on paper. I've used, X liters of soil and fertilizer. That's very easy to see. But what you're mentioning there is going to show is you have to budget for that. And that does come down to your cost of production. And that's very important. Because I totally agree with what you're saying. You have to be out there. You have to market yourself. But quickly on a follow-up, is there often a point where you would like to have a certain market segment at a certain price and you try to communicate down and it's just not possible?
Yes. On some SKUs, it just doesn't make sense. Some of the high THC SKUs in Alberta, where the taxes are really, very prohibitive. So yeah, or doing a half a joint in a tube, it just is not efficient. Your tube costs more, your label costs more, and then you've got the pressure from the retailers who are, kind of saying, my client won't spend more than $3 a joint. So you start doing the numbers, and some people want loss leaders. Some people that have fortunate to have a little bit of excess money, and they might want to drive a product and take a small loss, or just break even just to get that out there. But unfortunately, we're not in that situation. I don't even know if I had the extra money, if I would do that anyways. I'm more supporting what Nick says. Every SKU's got to be looked at on its own. It's got to be looked at on the velocity you can get. And then from there, you've got to go back and look at all the costs that I mentioned prior. How much is going to take us to bring it to market? How much are our reps going to take? And then you say it's not worth it. You might as well go with your strengths. And you'd rather have one or two really good runners, and not have a couple that'll take all the profits away from the runners. It's the more
it's
SKUs
the
are
opposite of
not,
the yeah,
more
it's the opposite
SKUs
of
are
the
not.
McDonald's French fries. And McDonald's
That's
French
right.
fries, they make a ton of money on it, and it's not a lost revenue, lost leader, right? It's very it's very interesting. But in short, it's fully understanding your cost of production, not just as a whole as a company, our cost of per gram, it's cost of production per SKU, so that you can make those fine decisions and decide if you want to play or not.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So Nick, this is how I see production planning and execution in my mind. I'm just going to go very high level here, but sales and marketing would drive the demand and the production planning because they're supposed to be out there in touch and being there. Then you get cultivation that executes, and then with the production and the financial targets. So who makes a decision, or who is involved in these conversations? How do you, because George mentioned that we can't be siloed anymore, so I'm kind of spinning off that siloed. Who makes these decisions to go forward, and who's involved in these conversations? How do you guys go about that?
It's a funny question you ask, because I got a perfect example of what happened today. In the past, we've been more cowboy, because there's no formula, right? There's no recipe. You can't just hire an R&D team and say, come up with the best product and this and that. So most of our products have been a labor of love, passion. Me in the middle of the night coming up with a product, and then the next day coming to the office and saying we're doing it, right? Everything's moving so fast. So we got launch dates coming up, and new like launch windows basically to get into provinces. So we've been, really doing it as a cowboy style, which is come up with the idea. We think like an idea gets sparked pretty much at the top level. And then we basically validate it through, looking at data, seeing with the team if it's feasible, and then, making that plan a reality. Now, we're trying to get more that exact comment that George commented on, and that we're trying to break down the silos, right? Because, have more people involved in the creative process and have more feedback. It just causes a lot of challenges because you have two competing kind of directions in a sense, unless you bring everybody together, which is what, again, George said, the common goal of we want to sell the best and be the best and make the best product. So that's where the top level still has to come in and tell everyone that's our objective. But if you try to break down the silo and say, like, guys, figure it out, what happens is that sales and marketing is like, go, we have these crazy ideas and all this stuff. And then you have operations that's already full capacity. And you're asking them to take on more work and open up a whole nother division and do this product SKU and this and this and this. So that's the eventual goal. It requires more time to work in that process. We're just at a really fast-paced environment. So I think we're in the process of creating that, and I think it's going to be a hybrid approach of creating SKUs, having a lot of buy-in, understanding the risks and the rewards, and then just making sure that we're not taking a lot of time in executing that. It's all hands on deck when we decide that a product is good to go.
So just quickly, because I've been in that. Oh, go ahead, George. Go ahead.
I just want to add on about this silo thing. It's not just exclusive to cannabis. Any company, has the same problems where people isolate what they're doing and don't think that how it reacts to another department or how you're all tied together. In cannabis, it's unlike any other industry where you had legacy people in the industry and you had suits come in. The fundamental problem that the cause was the suits came in and they forgot it was their industry. It was their industry and they were coming into their industry, not the legacy guy coming into this new legalized business. So fundamentally, there were two different worlds out there. And the ones that could work the both sides or understand the both sides are companies that are succeeding now. And so it's a little more complicated in our business because of the starting of the disrespecting from the legacy guys as you're coming into my industry and now you're telling me what to do. I think that was a bad start where guys were not listening to growers or not listening to people that really knew the cannabis plant, didn't know the regulations and didn't know all the white collar stuff. And that's where you see the great companies that did break down that one silo where they said, let me learn from you. Let me learn about growing. And you have to lead by example. Your staff's got to see that you as a founder or an executive will get their hands dirty. And that will help break down silos when they see you working and you're saying, what do you need from us? What can we do to make your life easier? Or do you need some packing? I got some time. I'll come in the back and help you. And those are the things that we all have to bring into this industry, us, especially us that came from other industries, is to really break down the differences and create the common goals that we have. Because the legacy guys have families, they want to make money, and they just like us. So we have the same goals, except we're coming from different places. And until we start realizing that we can help each other, it'll just kind of be a lot of conflict. But once we break that and we can show them how, legacy guys, how we are adding to this industry and we're not just stealing from it, I think that will help silos being broken and strong leadership. Like, look at a guy like Nicholas, who's one of the strong leaders, not just in Quebec, across Canada, financial guy, but he can play both sides and they understand it. He can, and that's where we all got to be. It's easier for him because he's 40 or 30 years old than a guy at 65. But still, there's a way to find common goals. That's all.
I do. I do fully understand. It's a balance between. To me, you're saying the suits and the legacy. I see it more passion and financial business or financial acumen. So those are two differences that really butted heads, and that's why I was asking the question previously to Nicholas, and then I'm happy you commented, George, about how does this process happen? Because I've been in the situation where finance is telling me to do something in the grow, and I'm like, hey, I'm the guy in the grow. You can't tell me how to do this or cut this out because you think you have to cut X percentage of that line asset. How do we, breach that? And I'm happy we're talking about it, because you mentioned, George, it happens in other companies, not just in cannabis. I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
And to be successful is involving, I believe, everybody at the table to be able to understand what is the big picture. And I think Nicholas said that, like, you have to understand the big picture as a whole to be able to all drive towards the same goal, right? So yeah, the communication between these silos and breaking the suits to the legacy. I stopped wearing my blazer. I started wearing a blazer because I ended up working at Deloitte, and then I took it off again. And then now I kind of want to put my blazer on with a joint in my breast pocket instead.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
To get that balance, you know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to seeing you again another show. So let's get back into some of these production costs and stuff. And I'm really happy we kind of dove into the communication aspect. But George, on your social media profile, it mentions that you push growers to stay competitive. What does this entail? Like, what do you mean by this, to stay competitive? Are you pushing them on cost, on new products?
Not necessarily on any one thing. It's like, as a leader in the company, you want to push everyone. You want to push everyone to search for excellence or to be excellent, and you can't push anyone until you understand what their role is and why they're doing certain things. But once you've broken down the communication and you're hearing why they would need this nutrient or this light or this HVAC, and you get it because we have the common goal of producing quality cannabis. So we know that we have that in common. Is it, a guy like myself would have to understand it. So once you understand it and you give all the tools to someone to create that, then you can start pushing him. I gave you all your tools. You got this, you got that. Why aren't you performing? What are you missing? You can't blame someone like your gentleman that told you, your finance guy, to cut this and cut that, and maybe, your crop wasn't as good, and then they're blaming you for not, delivering a good product, and you go, well, you cut what I told you to cut, or not to cut. So this is where I'm going. So it's I'm proud to say I'm a leader from the bottom up. I'm not a top down leader. I'm a bottom up leader. And I try to listen to my staff and everyone wants self-esteem. So if you realize they've done a good job, even if it's just a label, and if you haven't had any major, how should I say, recalls or major problems, it's really important, right, for a company that's packing or doing logistics, that you don't have problems along the way. They're just as important as you are getting a client to deal with you. It's maintaining them
Mm-hmm.
and showing them that they're with the best company. So when I said about pushing the growers, um, to me it's pushing everyone, and pushing it by showing that you're all in, that you're not just in
Yeah.
here to make cash out. We all know that that's not the story in cannabis anymore. That you're here for as long as you can be, and that I keep on telling the young people how jealous I am of them, that they have such a long ride in this business, where realistically, at my age, I know I'm probably going to just see maybe another 10 years, and then it's going to be a long, long road left. And that's what
Yeah.
everyone should be excited about. Um, so like the important thing is that there is an understanding before you start taking them to another level with you. And
Yeah.
expectations shouldn't be that someone's going to start and run. Once you get them where you're comfortable, then you expect that you can push them. you know I go back to with Nicholas about planning and the cowboy approach. I love that. But you need to have the resources to be a cowboy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for us, when we're looking about what we want to bring to market, everyone says, well, I'm a data guy. I like the data. I read the data. But the data has been around for 2 years, and it's changing.
Yeah.
So if you make a decision of what happened last year, and you say we're going all in on gummies, and you find out that that was just a spike, then you can be in trouble. I love data too, and I think it helps, but you need to have some sort of consistency. A 5-year period with retail being kind of stabilized, and then the market being stabilized, where you can really, really work with the data. Yes, we
Mm-hmm.
look at it.
Yeah.
We're looking at it, but it's not like uh, we live and die by the data. It could be very misleading. We read,
Yeah.
studies and stuff like that, but at the end, I guess the best way is to talking to bud tenders, retailers, and asking them, what do you need? The old fashioned way, what do you need? And we'll create it for you. And, it's the easiest sales
Well,
way to do it. Tell me what you
that
want.
was
Tell me what you want. I'll give it to you.
that was actually one of the biggest takeaways from our last talk, where we talked to retailers and some producers, and it was exactly that. Go talk to the retailers and not just send them an email and say, hey, can I see your data? They said go spend time there and go look on who's coming in, who's not. Take the time and effort to do so, and then you can cater, right? Because I agree with you. 2-year data on an industry is, the population is not that big enough to have that many data points. So it's not reliable. We're seeing big swings, and we're jumping on the swings. And we all know that 9 months is very old in our industry right now. So to look at trends from last year could be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Before I jump to the next question with Nick that I have, there's a question from the audience here. Just quickly, Nick, what was the startup cost that initially surprised you? That you believe is crucial to plan for? Is there any big surprises in a startup cost that happened that you could help?
The startup cost of the construction or the just of the total operation? I guess I can touch on
I,
both. I mean,
I think total operation, because construction could be a little bit of anything, but like total operation, I guess. What a biggest aha surprise that some people should think of that maybe was kind of snuck in there.
I'm really going to go back to what George said here, and the sales and marketing side. Sales and marketing, definitely when we're looking at costs, you're looking at your facility, you're planning your gross margin, and all that works. But then when it, to get into the market, to get onto the store shelves, that costs a lot of money. Even if you have the best product, you have to pay for trade marketing. You have to get onto that retail shelf. You have to have those salespeople pay those salespeople to come into the stores and push your product. And then once the customer knows about your product, then the wheel starts, right? So I think the biggest thing that we're not, a lot of people don't plan for is that sales and marketing. But
Good
I mean,
point.
if you're planning business, if you're a businessman and you understand business, you know that anywhere between 5 and 8% of your top line revenue needs to go into marketing in order to keep building that engine. So that, on our side, we did plan for that. So it's this is the first time building a retail cannabis business, right? So the intricacies of building that sales and marketing channels is something that's surprising.
And also all the different regulations and the what you're allowed to do and not to do and all that brings even more complexities into that, right? Very good point, because that's something that's not part of your application. Having done some license application for years, marketing plan and cost is never part of the budgets and what you present to Health Canada. So very good point to bring that piggybacks off of George.
And Nico,
So
just to comment on that,
yeah,
Nico, just like you said, the best way to get data and to get information is to be in front of retailers, and that costs. You have to send someone down there, a hotel, and there's a cost to that. To just,
yeah.
But that is what you need to do. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a very good point you guys both raised there. That's something that is eluding, or not eluding. People know they have to do that, but they probably often underestimate the cost of doing so. Yeah. So Nick, when we're talking about costs and these things, there's a point in process improvement where all the low hanging fruits are gone. You've refined, you've said that through R&D. So there's a lot of the big tickets that you've got eliminated. How do you keep improving? Like, you have your data, you guys mentioned that, and you've taken care of it. How do you keep improving? What other factors can you look at constantly? Because that should, in my opinion, should never end, right? You should never get to a point where you're comfortable with your production costs and nothing needs to change anymore. So yeah, any comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, there's constant improvement. There's those little dials and all that. For us, Cannara, there's also economies of scale. As we grow more plants, fixed costs stay stabilized, so then our cost per gram goes down as well. But I think the biggest thing is I just lost my thought here, but hold on. You want to just repeat the question? I don't know. Just my thought just escaped me here. It's gonna come
Yeah,
back
no
to me.
worries. Like all the low hanging fruits you guys have taken care of. How do you keep improving?
Yeah, I was gonna say yield, because you can plan your production costs, all that 55%, 15% I was talking about, but as soon as your yield takes a hit, you drop 7 grams per plant down or 5 grams per plant down, all that just goes down the tank, right? So constant improvement. Thankfully, the way I see the cannabis market, the way Cannara is going to innovate is through genetics, new flavors, the best flavors that I can find out there, and indica sativa hybrid, from lemons to apples to grapes to gas, and all the flavors I can find. But then the highest and best yield as well. And then the genetic on top of that, I would like to have it produce dry flower. I would like to have it produce live resin and also drop in rosin form. And then you have, you can, in our facility, we can find probably, or, to make it, we have 24 rooms, so we can find 24 genetics and run that all year. So it's going to be a long process before we find 24 genetics that hit the top yields and hit all those check marks. We just go through our pheno hunting processes a year. We pheno hunt probably about 700 to 1,000 seeds every pheno hunt 4 times per year. and we hope to land on 1 or 2, maybe 3 genetics. So and that's not checking, that might be a genetic, okay, it's great, but it checks all the boxes except it doesn't produce in rosin. So we'll still go for that. So that whole process to have everything checked off is going to take a while, and I'm excited. That's what excites me.
Is there an end to process improvement?
No, absolutely not. There's always improvements. There's new technologies. You're using a type of paper, and then you're at a trade show and you smoke another paper, and it's night and day, and you thought that was the best, and now you find even better that the market hasn't seen before. Same thing with vape tech, filters, hardware. The list goes on. So that's I think a benefit of myself is I'm a passionate cannabis smoker in every single category, and I like that R&D process. I like finding the best of the best, and then implement that and find out what the costs are, and then create the SKU, and then bring that to the market. So I think that process innovation, product development, all that's the whole thing that's going to keep building this engine.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question from the audience here, and it kind of goes in line with my next question I had for you, George, about improving costs. So Davin here says, with the cost of production decreasing with learnings, so as we get mature and we're learning more, and you both have said that, that's how naturally progression of refinement. What were some of the biggest innovations or implementations that have allowed you to realize some of these decreases? I'll start with George, and then maybe we'll hit Nicholas with that as well.
Well, like for us that are a private company that is not a large company, we found the best way is through synergies and partnerships. Not in the sense of us acquiring companies, but working with companies. In the case with us, we have an extraction company we work with in Montreal. We wanted to bring some hash to the market, but we didn't really want to jump in head first and start hiring people and equipment. So we found a company in Montreal, which is called Oasis, one of the best hash and extraction companies in Canada. And they were looking for a distribution partner. So, we've been dating, and whether it's that or whether it's negotiating better rates from our suppliers, transport. In my case, I'm talking about the logistics part of it. Not necessarily the growing part, is if you work with partners, you can synergize, you can share revenues, and then you can evolve with them. And then, as we know, they're talking about this year being a year of mergers and acquisitions. People are getting together and they're deciding that they're stronger with people than just doing it all on their own. It's a way to kind of work with groups that down the line you might want to do a merger with, or you might want to do more with them, saving your costs because that's their wheelhouse, and still bringing great products to the market under your brand. So we did, and in the aggregation, the fact that we know that we were small, so that if we package for people, that we all can gain efficiencies. As we get bigger, we gain more efficiencies with this strategy. The important thing is not rushing. Like I agree with Nicholas. There's people rush to buy machinery that really wasn't really made for cannabis, but adapted for cannabis. And a lot of the machinery broke down, or they didn't realize cannabis was sticky. Some of these big packing machines, or any other of these great innovations that came from another industry. Say, oh, it's going to work in cannabis. Those are things that you have to be very, very patient on. It's okay to be a second mover buying a piece of equipment. You're not missing anything, and you might be saving a lot of money. So when you're nimble, like we've been in the past, 4 or 5 years, you have to really, out of necessity, you have to find efficiencies, and we found it a lot with going outside, and of course all the efficiencies our great grower Patrick brings us. Our grower is a fantastic grower, and he'll bring us those efficiencies in the grow, much like what
Mhm.
Nicholas was saying. If a room produces 50 kilos and in the next harvest it does 60, and all the other costs are the same, well, you're in business. You just made some money, found money. If it goes the other way, well, your planning just went out the window.
Yeah, great. So, in short, strategic partnerships and leveraging economy of scale as
That's
best you
right.
can, and that's definitely so excellent.
But Nico, but
And
Nico, you got to understand, you're talking to, again, a company that's very large in Cannara and one that's not so large. So there might be different ways that Nicholas might, answer
correct.
that question. And might say, I don't need partners. I can do everything myself. And versus a guy like us, like Great White North, that strategically will need to work with people until they get to another level.
I was just gonna say, I mean, in the end, and I'll revert to Nick in a second. In the end, it's economy of scale that makes it happen, and then as you mentioned, you will get to that level where the more you produce or the more you package, the cheaper it is. So, Nick, any comment on that? On what was the big hitters for either automation or in innovation and cost reduction?
Absolutely. I mean, for processing is the biggest point, right? Like when you got the cultivation down pack, you got your growing, and then you got your plants, you dry it, and then you got all these different products that you're creating. So, the drawing phase, there's definitely, we try at the early beginning, we tried the fast and cost effective approach, which is tray dry and rack dry and wet buck and all that stuff as a test of, for sure that was not the quality and the way we wanted to go. But then we saw we knew the quality on dry. We validated it. We saw the cost difference. We said, you know what, we're accepting that because the quality and that is night and day. So we do that. Same thing with trimming. We did the hand trim. We did machine trim. We got cost inputs. We understood our cost. Said, okay, well, I clearly the objective is hand trim. We're going to make it work. So we made that work. For pre rolls, I think George said it the best. Start the operation like you would in your basement garage in cannabis. So it's not like a mature industry. Hire a bunch of people, figure out your tools, and put them in a room and see how it all works, and then slowly, you get ideas. Myself and the CEO Zohar is extremely active in building the operation. We build pretty much every operation from the ground up, and we start with like random tools that no one would ever think to use in cannabis that we buy off Amazon, and we bring it in the next day, and it's this machine for some other activity that we say, you know what, let's just put it in and try it, and it works, and then we start getting this, and it starts building up, and then another employee has an idea, and it all starts coming together, and then that 10x is our output, 20x is our output, and then once we get to a bottleneck there, then we start looking at automation if there's any automation that exists. Most of the time, the automation doesn't exist for the category or the effectiveness that we want. But in some areas, pre-roll machines, definitely, not the fully automated ones, but there's semi-automated ones that work fantastic and have really scaled our operation. We do all, our own butane extractions, so many efficiencies in butane extraction as well through just equipment purchases and efficiencies, and making it very streamlined. So definitely the machinery is something, but again, we have to consider quality.
Right.
For an example, HPS and LED lights, right? We were HPS, we went to LED, and now we're thinking that mixed light is actually probably the way to go. Um, that costs more money, right? So we'll make that, we make those decisions, case by case. But if the quality and the difference in the terpene levels, the THCs, shows us that it's better quality, we'll make it work.
Can I add something on that? Chris, I wanted to say something. Yeah, at any cost cutting, if it affects the product, then you're losing what your objective was. So yes, we got
100%.
to be efficient, but not at the cost of the product.
Correct. So
Yeah.
now this is actually a perfect segue to my next question, George. So thank you. So there's bound to be disagreements when you're talking about cost cutting because there's pressures that come above, there's different times of the year. So how do you decide what strategies to undertake without affecting the core values, and how do you go about it? Like Nick, for example, you probably have to make a decision at some point, say, no, this cost is too much. How do you work that with your team and to make sure they're on board?
Yeah, for us, it's never been, and that we have to be extremely careful in cannabis. It's never been, if it doesn't work, then the SKU doesn't make it. So like we have to look at the primary objective. Depends on what company and you know who you are. But if you're trying to build a brand and trying to build premium quality in products, you come up with the idea. You see if it works. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't make it, right. If we have to save
Mhm.
a dollar off the SKU to bring it back into margin, then that SKU just doesn't survive. You kill it and you move on to a better SKU, and you figure it out, right. So uh, but there's opportunities, and there's a lot of myths in cannabis, a lot of what we call bro science. um, the We have to validate that, right. We have to check it out, test it, and not just build an operation on myths. So we that's kind of like the areas where we went one way and we thought it was the best quality because it was a myth, and then we tried something else and we saved X amount of money and it was the same product or even better product. That was a great decision, right. So we still have to try everything and test everything and get the data, but make that decision not affecting quality of product. And if it affects the quality for product, for us, we it doesn't work, we have to figure out another way.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. So once again, really understanding fully your cost and where you can play. I mean, that's essentially what we're saying here. So George, on your from your perspective, I can imagine that sometimes you hear or you get your data and you make your analysis and you say, "Man, this segment is somewhere I want to be in. That's the price point." How easy or what are the challenges for you to communicate that with the team? Let's say, like, I'm just going to use something. I want to be in the $27 eighth category. Is that something that you just make a decision, or do you talk to your team? Do you bring forward the?
You have to do this. Like again, I go back to this. I'm a big guy in putting everyone in the room together, and if we all have objectives that were clearly stated and everyone realizes where we want to go, we do a whiteboard, and usually it'll come out, should we or not. If it's a gray area that is not so defined that it doesn't make sense, then my partner and myself might take a flyer on it. But we will look at the downside. And if it's too big, then we'll just nix it. And really, at the end of the day, if you have a tight group, everyone should be seeing the same things as you do. And so it's a little bit easier than if someone's driving it down that you're doing it no matter what. It's like
Correct.
overpowering your QA. Your QA is your guard, and then all of a sudden you're overruling them on something. What respect is that? And so it's the same thing. If someone worked in developing a product and brings it, and you do the analysis, and you just say no for no reason, well, that doesn't really work. But hopefully together you'll see the answer.
So good communication with all.
Yeah.
I still refer to the three departments: finance, cultivation, and marketing and sales.
Yes.
So very clear understanding on what everybody does. I have to
Yeah.
understand as a cultivator what Nick does and how his
Mm-hmm.
pennies count. And I also have to understand where George comes from, and where he's getting his information and what he's trying to create. So what strategies do you use? We just have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
So, George, what strategy do
Yeah.
you use in your company to keep this going? Do you have weekly cadence? What does
Yes.
it look like?
There's weekly meetings, and then if we have to call a meeting for this specific thing, we get all the people in the room that are touched by that.
And
Everyone
who's
that's
that?
touched,
Who's in the room?
it would be
Who's in the room?
our grower Pat, our finance guy, our VP of sales, and the three or four of us, and in some cases the complexities and QA might get involved as well if it has to do with an initiative that maybe is from someone
Of course.
outside sending us something, or we're doing a co-production with someone, or even buying cannabis. We know that a lot of people do B2B, and some people say we shouldn't buy from that grower. We've been disappointed. The guy says it works on my SKU. The QA says he doesn't trust what's going on in that facility. So there's whole thing. So you try to appease everyone's arguments and find a common ground. So yes, weekly meetings, and it's all about an attitude. It's all about saying we're all together here. And I know it sounds corny, but it works. It works. There's no I in team. And if we believe that it's a complicated business, I've even called it misery loves company. So the more people that you're together with, you're suffering all together or you're rejoicing all together, which is the way it should be. Everyone should be eating steak together, not three people eating steak and two eating hamburger. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And Nick, for you guys at Cannara, how does this look like in these strategies? And I'll comment on George's comment after.
Yeah, so we have a pretty solid group of VPs for each department. So we have a VP of marketing and sales. We have a VP of cultivation. We have a VP of transformation. We have a VP of finance. And we have a VP of general operations and QA. Myself and the CEO. So we by monthly we basically sit in a meeting, come up with these products that what's the next products that we want to make, or which categories we want to go, or which genetics are releasing, or whatnot. What's the next steps? And then we just do a roundtable, get everyone's comments, get everyone's problems with that particular product that we're trying to create, weigh out the risks and rewards. Like George said, it either goes left or it goes right. And then if it's in the middle, that's when myself and our Zohar come in and weigh out the risks and rewards and say if we're gonna make the bet on it and go with it. And it's always the biggest problem with that is just the time, and it's always this big, like these big projects, and everyone's risk about time, and do we have enough resources, and do we have enough cannabis to do this, do we have that? And so there's a lot of, you have to take all those questions, you understand them, but at some point, you also have to make the call to say, like, we can do this. If you make the call too many times and you can't do it, and you fail, and you're just pushing your team and it's always failing, then you're not doing your job right. But if you're the right leaders, you push your team just enough to make them walk and run and get that objective achieved, right? Just like all of us, right? We like to procrastinate, and as humans, and I think that's just we all just need that family and pushing each other to create that end product. And if there's big challenges, definitely welcome voices and figuring it out and addressing those, so that and making sure that you have a solution, and that you're taking, if someone communicated that problem, then you're taking on that problem as your responsibility, and you're taking that honor if that onerous if that product doesn't fail. Well, that guy told you so. So you have to respect those people and make sure that it comes up.
So really, I mean, thank you both. It comes down to lots of communication, lots of involvement from everybody, making sure that people are heard and are at the table, the proper people. And I'm very glad, George, that you mentioned Patrick being part of those meetings as well. And Nick, you mentioned your VP of cultivation and production. I think it's very important to have them fully understand not just what they do. I always say in the basement of the company, but what they provide to the whole company and how it affects everything. Because the big thing that you mentioned is 50 kilogram forecast. And if you get 60, great. If you get 40, not so great. So all these, so good metrics, good data, and excellent communication. Uh, I want to thank you. This is our time. I'd like to thank you both. Bless you, George. I'd
Thank
like to
you.
thank you
Sorry.
both for taking the time. It was extremely informative. I'm hoping that people got lots of information. I'm very happy you guys were very honest and open to discussion. And yes, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And this is our time.